The harsh wilderness of Arizona Territory in 1882 tested every principle of frontier hospitality. But what cattle rancher Thomas McKenna discovered wandering near his property line on a scorching July afternoon would challenge everything he understood about trust and identity. A weathered stranger, dressed in tattered clothes and nearly dead from hunger and thirst, stumbled onto his land seeking help that could mean the difference between life and death. What Thomas chose to do in those crucial moments, opening his home to a man whose origins he knew nothing about, would lead to a revelation at sunset that transformed his understanding of leadership and honor. His decision to extend unconditional hospitality to a desperate traveler would prove that true nobility often walks disguised among common men, teaching lessons about dignity that no book or sermon could ever convey. Chapter 1: Desert Desperation. The Arizona Territory summer of 1882 descended upon the Sonoran Desert with merciless intensity that had already claimed 3 travelers along the territorial roads. Thomas McKenna wiped sweat from his weathered brow as he rode his property line, checking fence posts that had been weakened by flash floods during the brief but violent monsoon season. At 45 years old, he had survived 8 brutal Arizona summers. But this July heat surpassed anything in his ranching experience as temperatures soared beyond 110 degrees in the precious shade. Thomas's cattle ranch sprawled across 15,000 acres of desert grassland, its boundaries marked by natural landmarks rather than conventional fencing due to the territory's vast distances and sparse population. His success came from understanding the harsh land's rhythms, knowing where underground springs provided reliable water, which plants indicated good grazing, and how to read weather patterns that could shift from drought to deadly flooding within hours. Movement caught his attention near a cluster of barrel cacti about half a mile from his main trail, something dark against the bleached landscape that didn't belong to the natural desert palette. His experienced eye immediately recognized the shape as human, though the figure's complete stillness suggested either unconsciousness or death. Thomas spurred his horse toward the motionless form, his frontier instincts recognizing the urgency that measured survival in minutes rather than hours under the punishing sun. As he approached, the wind-stirred dust revealed a man collapsed face down in the meager shade of a Palo Verde tree, his clothing torn and sun-bleached to the point where original colors had become indistinguishable. The stranger's dark hair was matted with dust and sweat, while his exposed skin showed the dangerous redness that preceded deadly heat stroke. Most telling was his complete lack of response to Thomas's approaching hoofbeats, a sign that consciousness had fled hours earlier. Thomas dismounted quickly and knelt beside the unconscious figure, checking for signs of life with the methodical precision that frontier experience had taught him. A weak pulse fluttered beneath sun-damaged skin, while shallow breathing indicated that death remained only minutes away unless immediate intervention preserved the last remnants of strength. The man's lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration, his body temperature elevated to dangerous levels that required urgent cooling. The stranger's appearance suggested someone accustomed to desert travel, his build lean and weathered in ways that spoke of lifelong exposure to harsh conditions. Yet his current state indicated miscalculation or misfortune that had left him stranded without water in the territory's most unforgiving season. Thomas faced no moral dilemma. Frontier hospitality demanded assistance regardless of the recipient's identity or circumstances. Without hesitation, Thomas lifted the unconscious man onto his horse and began the urgent ride back to his ranch house, knowing that his choice to help a dying stranger would set in motion events that would challenge every assumption he held about leadership, dignity, and the true nature of nobility in the American West. Chapter 2: Sanctuary and Sustenance. The cool interior of Thomas's adobe ranch house provided blessed relief from the Arizona heat as he carried the unconscious stranger through the thick wooden doors. Built in the traditional Spanish style with walls 3 feet thick, the structure maintained comfortable temperatures even during the territory's most brutal summer days. Thomas laid the man on his own bed, immediately beginning the careful process of treating severe heat exhaustion that could prove fatal if handled incorrectly. Thomas's experience with heat-related injuries served him well as he methodically lowered the stranger's body temperature using wet cloths and gradual cooling techniques. The man's skin burned with fever while his breathing remained shallow and rapid, clear indicators that his body's cooling systems had failed under the desert's relentless assault. Thomas worked with practiced efficiency, knowing that too rapid cooling could cause dangerous shock, while insufficient treatment would allow organ failure to claim another victim. Over the following hours, consciousness gradually returned to the mysterious traveler as his body responded to careful hydration and cooling. Dark eyes opened with the wariness of someone accustomed to danger, though weakness prevented any attempt at sudden movement. Thomas spoke in gentle, reassuring tones while offering small sips of cool water, understanding that trust would develop slowly between strangers in territorial lands where survival often depended on judging character accurately. Communication proved easier than expected as the man spoke clear English with an accent that suggested education beyond what his current condition might indicate. He introduced himself simply as Grey Wolf, offering no additional details about his origins or destination. His voice carried quiet dignity despite obvious exhaustion, while his manner suggested someone accustomed to leadership rather than following orders from others. Thomas provided simple but nourishing food, beans, bread, and preserved meat that would restore strength without overwhelming a system weakened by starvation. Grey Wolf ate with careful restraint, displaying table manners that spoke of refinement uncommon among desert travelers. His gracious acceptance of hospitality impressed Thomas with its combination of genuine gratitude and maintained personal dignity. As evening approached, Grey Wolf's condition had stabilized enough for basic conversation, though he remained notably reluctant to discuss the circumstances that had brought him to collapse in the Arizona desert. Thomas respected his guest's privacy, understanding that frontier courtesy demanded patience rather than intrusive questioning about personal matters that might involve dangerous or sensitive information. Chapter 3: The Unknown Journey. The following days revealed layers of complexity beneath Grey Wolf's humble exterior as his strength gradually returned under Thomas's careful attention. The stranger moved with unconscious grace that spoke of natural authority, while his knowledge of desert survival techniques impressed the experienced rancher with insights that went far beyond typical traveler wisdom. Grey Wolf could predict weather changes hours in advance by reading subtle cloud formations and wind patterns that most men would never notice. Thomas found himself drawn into conversations that challenged his understanding of the territorial landscape he thought he knew completely. Grey Wolf possessed intimate knowledge of water sources, game trails, and seasonal plant cycles across hundreds of miles of Arizona desert, information that suggested years of systematic exploration rather than casual travel. His observations about Apache culture revealed an understanding that went beyond surface contact, demonstrating familiarity with customs and beliefs that few outsiders ever learned. The mysterious guest's reluctance to discuss his recent travels became more pronounced as his health improved, deflecting questions about his destination and origins with polite but firm changes of subject. When Thomas inquired about family or companions who might be searching for him, Grey Wolf's expression grew distant, suggesting painful separations or responsibilities that weighed heavily upon his conscience. His manner indicated someone accustomed to making decisions that affected many lives. Grey Wolf's physical recovery proceeded remarkably quickly, his lean frame regaining strength with the resilience of someone whose body had endured hardship throughout his lifetime. Yet beneath his improving condition lay an undercurrent of restlessness, as if important matters demanded his attention elsewhere. Thomas noticed his guest frequently gazing toward the distant mountains, his dark eyes holding expressions of longing mixed with determination that spoke of unfinished business. The stranger's knowledge extended beyond survival skills to encompass a sophisticated understanding of territorial politics, federal policies affecting Native American relations, and the complex dynamics between various tribal nations throughout the Southwest. His insights into military strategies and diplomatic negotiations revealed education that seemed inconsistent with his current circumstances as a lone traveler without visible resources or protection. Thomas began to suspect that Grey Wolf's journey involved purposes far more significant than personal travel. Though respect for frontier privacy prevented direct questioning about matters his guest clearly preferred to keep confidential. The growing bond between the two men was built on mutual respect rather than complete transparency, each recognizing qualities in the other that transcended their different backgrounds and circumstances. As Grey Wolf's stay entered its second week, Thomas realized that his simple act of desert rescue had brought him into contact with someone whose true identity and mission would likely prove far more extraordinary than anything his isolated ranch had ever witnessed, setting the stage for revelations that would transform his understanding of leadership, dignity, and the complex relationships that shaped territorial Arizona. Chapter 4. Bonds of Respect. The deepening friendship between Thomas and Grey Wolf transcended the typical boundaries between host and guest as mutual respect replaced initial caution. Grey Wolf's insights into Apache culture revealed a sophisticated understanding that went beyond academic knowledge, suggesting personal connections that ran deeper than casual observation. He spoke of tribal customs with the intimate familiarity of someone who had participated in sacred ceremonies and understood their spiritual significance from within rather than as an outside observer. Thomas found himself learning desert survival techniques that surpassed his 8 years of Arizona ranching experience. Grey Wolf demonstrated how to locate underground water sources by reading vegetation patterns invisible to untrained eyes, identify edible plants that could sustain life during emergencies, and navigate by star positions that remain constant across seasonal changes. His knowledge encompassed not just practical survival, but the deeper understanding of desert ecology that came from viewing the landscape as a living system rather than hostile territory to be conquered. The mysterious guest's bearing continued to suggest authority that extended beyond personal confidence into genuine leadership experience. Grey Wolf possessed the unconscious habit of scanning surroundings with tactical awareness, positioning himself strategically during conversations and making observations about defensive advantages that revealed military thinking. His questions about Thomas's ranch operations demonstrated understanding of resource management, personnel supervision, and strategic planning that indicated experience commanding significant numbers of people. Grey Wolf's physical presence commanded respect despite his recent ordeal in the desert. His recovery had revealed a lean but powerful frame marked by scars that spoke of battles survived and dangers overcome. The stranger moved with the fluid grace of someone whose reflexes had been honed through years of potential combat, while his weathered hands showed calluses consistent with extensive weapon handling rather than typical manual labor. Thomas began recognizing signs that Grey Wolf's true identity involved responsibilities far greater than personal survival or simple travel. The stranger's moments of distant contemplation suggested weighty decisions affecting many lives, while his occasional references to his people indicated leadership obligations that demanded eventual return despite personal preferences for peaceful refuge. Their evening conversations revealed Grey Wolf's remarkable education in subjects ranging from federal Indian policy to military tactics, territorial law, and diplomatic protocols between various southwestern tribes. His insights into complex political relationships demonstrated intimate knowledge of personalities, alliances, and conflicts that shaped regional stability throughout the Arizona Territory. As Grey Wolf's stay approached its third week, Thomas understood that their friendship had created bonds that would endure regardless of whatever dramatic revelations awaited regarding his guest's true identity and the circumstances that had brought such an extraordinary individual to seek sanctuary at an isolated cattle ranch. Chapter 5. The Revelation at Dusk. The Arizona sunset painted the desert sky in brilliant shades of orange and crimson on Grey Wolf's 21st day at the ranch, when the distant thunder of approaching hoofbeats shattered the evening's peaceful silence. Thomas looked up from his evening chores to see a line of mounted Apache warriors cresting the ridge that bordered his property, their silhouettes dramatic against the fading light. His blood chilled as he counted at least 30 riders moving with a disciplined formation that marked experienced war parties rather than casual travelers. Grey Wolf emerged from the ranch house with calm dignity that seemed inconsistent with the approaching danger, showing no surprise at the warriors' arrival. Instead of seeking shelter or weapons, he walked deliberately toward the center of the ranch yard, his bearing transforming from humble guest to unmistakable authority. The change in his demeanor was so complete that Thomas barely recognized the man he had nursed back to health from near death in the desert heat. The lead warrior dismounted with ceremonial precision, removing his war bonnet to reveal graying hair adorned with eagle feathers that caught the last rays of sunlight. His weathered face bore the dignity of someone accustomed to command, while his ornate clothing indicated high rank within Apache society. Yet when he approached Grey Wolf, this formidable leader dropped to one knee in a gesture of respect that spoke volumes about the true hierarchy between them. The warrior's reverent posture and formal gestures revealed the shocking truth that had been hidden for 3 weeks beneath Grey Wolf's humble exterior. The man Thomas had rescued from certain death in the desert heat was not merely a knowledgeable traveler, but an Apache chief of sufficient importance to warrant search parties of 30 warriors. The mysterious stranger who had graciously accepted basic hospitality commanded respect from seasoned war leaders whose authority extended across vast territories. Thomas felt the ground shift beneath his understanding as the magnitude of his situation became clear. Grey Wolf's unexplained journey through the desert, his intimate knowledge of Apache culture, his natural authority and military bearing. All these signs suddenly formed a coherent picture that left Thomas stunned by the recognition of his guest's true identity and status. The humble stranger who had shared his table and accepted his care was actually one of the most influential Apache leaders in territorial Arizona, a man whose decisions affected thousands of lives throughout the Southwest. Grey Wolf's mysterious desert ordeal had been far more than simple travel gone wrong. It represented a deliberate test of character that few white men had ever witnessed, let alone passed with such distinction. As the warrior rose to his feet and began speaking in the Apache language, Thomas realized that his simple act of desert rescue had unknowingly created bonds with one of the most powerful tribal leaders in the territory, transforming his isolated ranch in a neutral ground where two cultures might find unexpected common understanding. Chapter 6. Honor Among Leaders. The ceremonial exchange that followed revealed the true purpose behind Grey Wolf's mysterious journey through the Arizona desert, as Thomas witnessed traditions that few white men had ever been privileged to observe. The Apache chief's explanation, delivered through careful English mixed with gestures that transcended language barriers, unveiled a deliberate test of character that had transformed a simple act of hospitality into something approaching sacred significance within tribal culture. Grey Wolf's ordeal had been no accident, but rather a traditional trial undertaken by Apache leaders to evaluate the worthiness of potential allies during times of increasing federal pressure on tribal sovereignty. By deliberately placing himself in mortal danger, the chief had created circumstances that would reveal the true nature of any person who discovered him. Thomas's immediate response to offer aid without questions about identity, payment, or political affiliation had demonstrated the kind of character that Apache wisdom recognized as worthy of trust and respect. The chief's weathered hands gestured towards ceremonial items that his warriors had brought from distant tribal lands. A beaded vest crafted by master artisans, silver ornaments that carried spiritual significance, and most precious of all, a medicine pouch containing sacred objects that would mark Thomas permanently as a friend of the Apache people. These gifts represented wealth beyond territorial understanding. Their value was measured not in currency, but in the cultural bonds they created between previously separate worlds. Thomas's transformation from isolated rancher to recognized ally of one of the Southwest's most influential tribal leaders carried responsibilities that would reshape his remaining years on the frontier. His ranch would become neutral ground where Apache families could conduct peaceful business with territorial merchants, while his unique status provided legitimacy that prevented either culture from viewing such activities as threatening or suspicious. The chief's blessing carried enormous weight throughout Apache society, making Thomas's word valuable in negotiations that had previously been impossible. Federal authorities would eventually recognize Thomas's unprecedented position as a cultural mediator, calling upon his services to prevent conflicts that might otherwise escalate into warfare. His simple act of desert rescue had created opportunities for understanding that military force alone could never achieve, proving that individual acts of mercy could reshape entire political landscapes when guided by genuine respect for human dignity, regardless of racial or cultural differences. As the Apache warriors prepared to depart under the rising moon, Thomas understood that his willingness to save a dying stranger had forged bonds that would endure far beyond his own lifetime, establishing precedents for cooperation that would influence territorial relationships throughout the Southwest and demonstrate that true leadership often walked disguised among common men, testing the character of those who would prove worthy of trust and alliance. This incredible tale of hidden identity and desert hospitality proves that true character reveals itself in how we treat strangers who need our help. If Thomas's remarkable story of unknowing leadership moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more legendary frontier tales. What would you have done finding that stranger in the desert? Share your thoughts below.